this story's feeling kind of boring to me. Maybe I should add a side plot. We've probably all had that moment before where you're trying to decide if your plot needs something extra, if you need something on the side going on to make it more interesting. This is actually something that I went through fairly recently with my work in progress. I got to a point where I was just a little bit bored with the point I was at in the book, and I was like, maybe I should add extra storylines. So I've been reading up about it a lot, and I definitely have some thoughts. I've been really thinking about my favorite books and how they handle side plots. A good side plot contributes to the existing story instead of taking away from it, covering it up, or just being extraneous. There's your SAT word of the day. If you're trying to decide if a potential side plot will contribute to or take away from your story, there's a few different things you can look at. Maybe you're looking at adding a character or adding a character's backstory. If that's the case, you should look at if that character's story will in some way contribute to your main character's story. If you're going to be adding in a lot of details about a non-main character story, it needs to somehow reflect, contrast, compare to your main character's story. You see this a lot in literature. For example, you have the story of Gollum in Lord of the Rings. This story is important because it contrasts so well with Frodo's stories. The two characters are very similar when they start out on their respective journeys. They both get the ring, but it's how they respond to the ring that is really important to the entire story of Lord of the Rings. Without the story of how Gollum succumbed to the ring's power, Frodo resisting the ring's power for so long would seem less important and less heroic. Another great example is, of course, in Harry Potter. In the 7th book, we get the story of Severus Snape. Snape and Harry both come to Hogwarts from not great family lives. They have not had good childhoods. Seeing how Snape chose to seek after power by joining Slytherin, joining the Death Eaters, being mean and cruel to Lily and other students, is a great foil to Harry's choices when he gets to Hogwarts. When we read Snape's story in the Deathly Hallows, it reminds us of how Harry was given the choice between Slytherin and Gryffindor, between bravery and power, and he chose to be brave and to be kind. You'll also notice that a good character backstory will enhance the theme of the book. Like I was just saying, a lot of Harry's story is about choices and who we choose to be. We also get that reflected in the books through the contrast between Neville Longbottom and Peter Pettigrew. I mean, really, the plot of the books could go along pretty well without so much focus on these two characters, but it's what we learn about the theme that makes them so important. At the beginning of their respective stories, Neville and Peter are actually fairly similar, particularly in how they interact with their group of friends. They're both kind of the quieter, they're expected to be less successful in school and in life, and they kind of just follow around their friends a lot. But once again, it's their choices, not their personalities, that decides what ending they get in the series. Peter chooses once again to go after powerful people, to follow powerful people, to be protected by others, while Neville chooses to be brave and selfless and a fighter. In turn, Neville becomes a hero in his story, while Peter just becomes a pawn of the villain. Neville's decision to fight for his friends, contrasted with Peter's decision to betray his, that's some powerful stuff right there. Now let's say that your side plot is less of a character or a backstory and more of an actual plot, an event that takes place, or information that we get. Like an extra character, an extra plot should enhance your theme. For example, in Order of the Phoenix, we get this entire plot line about Umbridge and how terrible she is and everything she does in the school. Umbridge helps reflect the hate and bigotry of Voldemort and his followers on a smaller scale for us. Another great thing that Umbridge's plot does, and that every good side plot should do, is it raises the stakes. A bad side plot is repetitive. For example, if Umbridge had been as mean and terrible as Snape, then she wouldn't have added anything to the story. But by being so extreme and even worse, it really raises those stakes as the story goes on. Throughout the series so far, we've always seen Hogwarts as such a safe place. Even how mean Snape is really can't get rid of that safe feeling. But Umbridge, she eliminates that safe feeling. No one is safe at Hogwarts, and that's another thing that we see come back in the 7th book when we find out what the students have been going through while Harry, Ron, and Hermione are gone. Another great example of a side plot raising the stakes in a story is in Star Wars when Luke finds out that Darth Vader is his father. Up until this point, you know, Luke and the rebels, they have things to worry about. They are leading a rebellion, they have to worry about the Emperor, he's a pretty bad guy, and he's got Darth Vader working for him, he doesn't seem too nice. But when you find out that he's actually a family member of Luke, that makes things harder for Luke emotionally. Luke finds out that things aren't quite as simple as just bringing down the Empire, but bringing down his own father. Of course, it could be a great side plot that could really add to your story, but one last thing you need to think about is if you're going to be able to handle the extra plot. What is it going to do to the ending of the story? Is it something extra that you're going to have to wrap up? How easy will it be to do that? And if you've thought about all these things and you still can't figure out if a side plot is going to be useful or hurtful in your novel, there's 2 things you can do. One, you can just keep on writing your book the way you're writing it, forget about the side plot, get to the end. And then you can go back and reread it, and maybe it will be boring and you will need something extra. Or maybe it's going to be plenty and you'll realize there's not room for something else. Option number 2, you can add that side plot. Put it in right now, find out what happens. Maybe it will end up being a wonderful addition. It'll really add to what your character is going through. It will provide a great comparison or contrast. Or maybe it's just going to tangle up the book. Maybe you will get stuck a couple chapters later. Maybe you'll find that you have too many plot threads going on. Anyway, those are all my thoughts, for now at least, about side plots. Sorry, I think it got a little bit rambling in there, but hopefully you found it useful. And let me know in the comments if you have effectively added extra plot lines to your book, or if you've maybe had to cut plot lines before because they were too much. And don't forget to join us this Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Time for our live chat.